and I rushed to the hospital to see how I could help. This shooting was the deadliest in modern U.S. history. 58 innocent people have died, and over 500 were injured. The 58 innocent victims came from all walks of life. They came to Las Vegas from all over the United States of America. Some were there to celebrate their birthdays, their favorite country singer, a night out with friends and family, and even celebrating their wedding anniversaries. Even though these families will never get another Christmas, another Thanksgiving, or another birthday with their loved one, they will never forget them. And we won't either. As we grieve for those who were killed or injured and pray for their families, I want to recognize the heroes who bravely and selflessly rushed to help. Law enforcement officers and first responders, including some who were off duty and attending the concert, who ran toward the gunfire to protect the concert goers and provide desperately needed care for victims. People at the concert who shielded those around them, gave them medical care, and led others to safety, exposing themselves to the hail of bullets while they tried to save others. People driving by who used their cars to help take shooting victims to the hospitals. Strangers helping strangers. The healthcare professionals, doctors, nurses, support staff, and volunteers who have been working tirelessly around the clock to care for the more than 500 injured people. Hospitality industry employees who rushed to help however they could. And the Las Vegas businesses and residents who have generously donated their money, time, and blood to help the victims. To all of these heroes, I say thank you. Thank you so much. Over the coming days and weeks, I plan to speak on this floor about each individual victim, to honor their life and to tell their story. I will also be speaking out about what Congress needs to do to prevent another tragedy like this from happening. We should never forget the victims of October 1st, 2017. But as we embark on the long process of healing, I'm forever grateful for the incredible heart and spirit shown by the Las Vegas community. I've never been prouder to be a Las Vegan, and I've never been prouder to be a Nevadan. And I know that my city is and will always be Vegas strong. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back the balance of his time. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Babin, for 5 minutes.
Request unanimous consent to address the House for 5 minutes.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor the life of Commander Seth Anthony Stone, a native Texan, a devout Christian, and a true American hero who left us far too early on September the 30th, 2017, at the age of 41 years old. Twice the recipient of the Silver Star Medal, our nation's third highest combat award, Seth was among the most highly decorated U.S. Navy SEALs. As a SEAL platoon commander in Iraq during the Battle of Ramadi in 2006, he served alongside my son, Leif Babin, as they led some of the toughest sustained urban combat operations in the history of the SEAL teams. Seth was a storied and an exceptional combat leader that helped turn the tide for America in two of the most pivotal battles of the Iraq War. Seth and his SEAL platoon played an integral role in the victorious efforts of the U.S. Army's 1st Armored Division's Ready First Brigade Combat Team that transformed Ramadi from the most violent and dangerous place in Iraq to a stable, secure, and peaceful city. In more than 6 months of continuous urban combat, a number of his SEALs were wounded and killed in action, including Master-at-Arms 2nd Class Michael Mansour, when he dove onto a grenade to save 3 of his SEAL teammates next to him. For his actions, Petty Officer Mansour was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor. Seth returned to Iraq 2 years later and led a SEAL task unit that included American sniper Chief Petty Officer Chris Kyle, also from Texas. Seth's outstanding combat record placed him in a very special class that included Petty Officer Michael Mansour, Chief Petty Officer Chris Kyle, Petty Officer Mark Lee, and Petty Officer Ryan Jobe. Seth epitomized the warrior ethos, risking his life on many occasions in combat against our nation's mortal enemies. He saved countless U.S. service members, and he helped bring stability to embattled regions of the world. And about his military service, Seth said, "It was my honor to fight for my country. The best life is one lived as a sacrifice for others. I love my country, and I love the teams. That is what drove me to fight so hard for America while wearing the SEAL Trident. At the same time, I did not really consider myself to be a SEAL, but rather a soldier for the Lord." In everything he did, and throughout his life, he served the Lord from a place of deep faith. He was a very special person. I was proud to know him, and I will be forever grateful for his service to our great country and the friendship and camaraderie that he had with my son and all those that he served with. And while Seth has left us on earth, his passion for his friends, his country, and his Lord will certainly live on and never be forgotten. Thank you, and I yield back, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Ohio, Ms. Capter, for 5 minutes.
There was applause from the gallery, and every American applauds. Mr. Speaker, I have an alert for the Trump administration. The Trump-led FEMA, that's the Federal Emergency Management Agency, part of the Department of Homeland Security, is falling far short on disaster relief in Puerto Rico. In fact, I think one could say they are actually perilously short on helping the people, our fellow citizens in Puerto Rico. It has now been 22 days, that's 528 hours, since Hurricane Maria destroyed Puerto Rico. Now, hundreds of thousands of our fellow citizens in Puerto Rico still have no fresh water, no power, little food, with many villages lacking any means for communication. Many have no dry cots or even dry sleeping bags to replace the wet mattresses and moldy surroundings that characterize the Puerto Rico of today. Now, let me say that Puerto Rico is not a large island. It's a little over 100 miles wide, not much larger than my congressional district in Ohio, which extends from Cleveland to Toledo. The difference with Puerto Rico is the topography is much more hilly. So I ask myself the question, why hasn't FEMA had airdrops of vital sustenance from the very start? Where is that help to these far-flung villages that have been cut off because when the rains came, they washed out bridges and roads that make all these tiny towns inaccessible? Inaccessible. Fresh water packets can be airdropped. Our military does that all over the world. Why can't those freshwater packets be dropped in Puerto Rico? We can drop packets with peanut butter and bread. We do that all over the world. Why can't we do that in Puerto Rico? Why can't we air packet drop food? Citizens in Ohio with families and friends in Puerto Rico about whom they are desperately worried have been told that many smaller towns that where they have relationships lack relief and any assistance now, 528 hours, 22 days into this deep human tragedy. I want to place on the record, and I hope somebody at FEMA is listening, names of some of the villages that are completely cut off because roads and bridges were destroyed, and no relief has come. No relief has come. Ponce in the south is one. Utuado, Yayuya, Arecibo, Huaco, Corozal, Comerio, Luisa, Toa Baja, Cabo Rojo, Lanaras. Those are names we have been given. Aid to these pockets of desperation is almost 3 weeks overdue. People need relief now. FEMA also needs a better plan. In fact, they need a plan. I don't think they have any plan to immediately evacuate people to the mainland for respite. Places like Cleveland, Lorain, Ohio, Toledo, Ohio, we could accept people who now are living in conditions you would wish on no American. We cannot risk more illness and death. Children should not be missing school after the horror they've experienced. And we shouldn't have the level of hardship that have been subjected to people who are still enduring the devastation of Maria. What is happening there is inhumane. Most of the television stations are down in San Juan. And that's where the governor of Puerto Rico is most of the time when our Codels go down there. But the desperation is in the countryside. It's outside of San Juan, which is inaccessible. President Trump, the people of America, and let me tell you, those in Ohio, need you to help their families and countrymen now. FEMA can do so much better for our fellow Americans. FEMA's initials stand for Federal Emergency Management. So where is the emergency? Where is the management? And where is the federal reputation for excellence and leaving no man or woman behind? FEMA, shape up. America demands more, and Americans deserve more. I yield back.
Gentlewoman's time has expired. The chair will remind all persons in the gallery that they are here as guests of the House and that any manifestation of approval or disapproval of proceedings is in violation of the rules of the House. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Indiana, Mr. Messer, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to urge President Trump to decertify the disastrous Iran nuclear deal. There are reports that decertification may come as early as tomorrow, and I certainly hope so. The Iran nuclear deal was a giant mistake. It has been bad for America's national security, bad for our ally Israel's national security, and bad for the world. By decertifying the flawed Iran nuclear deal before October 15th, the administration has a chance to send a strong message that the United States will not sit idly by while the Iranian threat continues to grow. The deal was premised on a naive notion that Iran would somehow evolve into a peaceful global partner. But that couldn't have been further from the truth. Make no mistake about it, Iran is not our friend, does not share our values, and should not have been trusted. For decades, Iran has called the United States the Great Satan, and their leadership continues to call for the total annihilation of our ally, Israel. Iran remains the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world and is actively working towards obtaining a nuclear bomb. This much is clear. Iran has not upheld the spirit of this deal. Now is the time to reassert our authority on the world stage and hold Iran accountable. I look forward to working with President Trump to keep America, our allies, and the rest of the world safe from Iranian aggression. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Yoho, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to honor the discovery of Hernandez de Soto's 1939 encampment and the lost Native American town of Potano by the University of Florida professors Dr. Fred White, Dr. Michelle White, and University of Florida honors student Ethan White. This newly discovered archaeological site is the oldest confirmed New World contact site in the United States. In one of the most important events in U.S. history, De Soto was the first European to discover the Mississippi River and explore an area that today would hold 10 states. Until this incredible archaeological discovery, there was no physical evidence of De Soto's 4,000-mile journey. The collection of artifacts recovered near Orange Lake, Florida, include very rare King Ferdinand's coins, Queen Isabella coins, and King Enrique IV of Castile coins. That is the oldest dated European artifact ever unearthed in the United States. Other rare items include Murano glass beads and Spanish weapons and armor dated from the early 1500s. The artifacts were excavated in lost ancient Native American town of Potano. Also discovered in the town of Potano were the remains of the first locations of the San Buenaventura Franciscan mission built there in the 1580s. Within the floors of the 16th century mission, the team discovered the largest cache of medieval coins found in the American mainland so far. Acknowledgement for confirmation and identification of the artifacts goes to a large and diverse group of scholars throughout the country. The recent scientific findings were published in the peer-reviewed International Journal of Archaeology and with the Florida Department of State, Divisions of Historical Resources, the Bureau of Archaeological Research in Tallahassee, Florida. The collection of artifacts is at the Florida Museum of Natural History on the campus of my alma mater, the University of Florida. Additionally, I'd like to recognize today is the National Farmers Day, a day when we say thanks to all of our farmers and ranchers for the work they do. Our agricultural industry, in a lot of ways, is the backbone of this country. It feeds our nation and a big portion of the world and accounts for 11% of overall employment. Most people don't realize how farmers affect their life, but it's important to reflect on the interdependence between rural and urban life. People often associate Florida with tourism, but agriculture is actually Florida's #2 industry, utilizing 1/3 of Florida's available land. Without agriculture, urban developments, in fact, all developments, could not flourish. There is a simple symbiotic relationship between families and communities. And that is, if you're hungry, you're going to eat. Every time you get hungry, you think about your farmer, so thank a farmer today. It is fitting that our National Farmers Day, on National Farmers Day, that I'm able to rise and honor a true Florida legend, Mr. Bud Adams of Fort Pierce, Florida, and his contributions to the Florida cattle industry. He is an icon in Florida and the nation's cattle industry. Mr. Adams was a pioneer, a wildlife photographer, but more than anything else, he was a true American pioneer and cattle rancher. He was a real American cowboy in Florida, and they are known in Florida as Florida Crackers, and that name is derived from the sound of a bullwhip when it's used to round up and herding cattle. After a stint in the Navy during World War II, Mr. Adams returned home to work and grow the family ranch. For the past 80 years, you could find Mr. Adams on horseback surveying the land and the cattle that they raised. He was a strong advocate for conservation and was nationally recognized for his leadership in preserving the land for future generations. Even more so, Mr. Adams is known for creating the Brayford breed of cattle, which is a cross between the Brahman cattle and the Hereford cattle. And it's a heat-tolerant, heavy beef-producing cow, ideal for the Florida climate. Mr. Adams was rightfully proud of this breed and went on to help found the United Brayford Breeders Associations. Additionally, Mr. Adams was a proud member of the Florida Cattlemen's Association. He served as the president in 1958, and for the last 59 years, he was always willing to offer a helping hand to the new Florida Cattlemen's leadership. Mr. Adams will always be remembered for the impact he had on the Florida cattle industry and his willingness to nurture future generations of the Florida cattlemen. He will be greatly missed, and I thank you and yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentlewoman from Florida, Ms. Ross-Latham, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to encourage my colleagues to support the CARE Corps Demonstration Act. By the year 2030, there will be more than 72 million older Americans. As they age, many of these seniors will require long-term support and services, placing a significant burden on our elder care system that is already struggling to provide and finance services to our seniors. The CARE Corps Demonstration Act, which my colleague, Congresswoman Michelle Lujan Grisham, and I have introduced, will address this growing need by placing CARE Corps volunteers in communities where they will provide essential services to seniors that will allow these older Americans to remain independent. In turn, these wonderful volunteers will receive assistance in paying down their educational expenses. And more importantly, Mr. Speaker, this program will help us train a new generation of healthcare providers to meet our nation's demand for senior care services by giving our students essential real-world experience in the field. Mr. Speaker, this bill will create stronger communities across our nation by bringing generations of Americans together. I encourage my colleagues to support our bill, the CARE Corps Demonstration Act of this session, and the bill number, Mr. Speaker, is H.R. 3493. So please contact our congressional office or the office of Congresswoman Michelle Lujan Grisham to co-sponsor H.R. 3493. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Abraham, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to recognize American farmers also on National Farmers Day. I call our American farmers the thin green line because food security is national security. We can never discount the importance of our nation's ability to feed itself, and we can do so only by the hard work of the men and women in the agricultural community. In honor of National Farmers Day, I wanted to recite a poem first delivered by a radio personality, Paul Harvey, to the FAA convention in 1978. The poem is as follows. And on the 8th day, God looked down on his planned paradise and said, I need a caretaker. So God made a farmer. God said, I need somebody willing to get up before dawn, milk cows, work all day in the fields, milk cows again, eat supper, then go to town and stay past midnight at a meeting of the school board. So God made a farmer. I need somebody with arms strong enough to rustle a calf and yet gentle enough to deliver his own grandchild. Somebody to call hogs, tame cantankerous machinery, come home hungry, have to wait for lunch until his wife's done feeding visiting ladies, then tell the ladies to be sure and come back real soon and mean it. So God made a farmer. God said, I need somebody willing to sit up all night with a newborn colt and watch it die and then dry his eyes and say, maybe next year's. I need somebody who can shape an axe handle from a persimmon sprout, shoe a horse with a hunk of car tire, who can make a harness out of haywire, feed sacks, and shoe scraps, who, planting time comes and harvest season, will finish his 40-hour week by Tuesday noon, and then painting from tractor back, put in another 72 hours. So God made a farmer. God had to have somebody willing to ride the ruts at double speed to get the hay in ahead of the rain clouds, and yet stop in midfield and race to help when he sees the first smoke from a neighbor's place. So God made a farmer. God said, I need somebody strong enough to clear trees and heave bales, yet gentle enough to tame lambs and wean pigs and tend to the pink comb pullets, who will stop his power mower for an hour to splint the broken leg of a meadowlark. It's had to be somebody who would plow deep and straight and not cut corners. Somebody to seed, weed, feed, breed, and rake, and disc, and plow, and plant, and tie the fleece, and strain the milk, and replenish the self-feeder, and finish a hard week's work with a 5-mile drive to church. Somebody who would bail a family together with the soft, strong bonds of sharing, who would laugh and then sigh, and then reply with smiling eyes when his son says that he wants to spend his life doing what his dad does. So God made a farmer. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the Chair declares the House in recess until noon today.
And members, back at noon Eastern for legislative work today, bills including a $36.5 billion disaster relief bill for recent hurricanes and western wildfires, also a bill dealing with federal whistleblower protections and possible further action on the defense programs and policy bill. More live House coverage here on C-SPAN when they gavel back in 35 minutes or so. We're going to take you live now to the White House. President Trump shortly is expected to sign on an executive order dealing with health care. The president aiming to make it easier for Americans to buy bare-bones health insurance plans, according to Reuters. We take you there live to the White House. Let me know when you want me back on.
Good morning. President Trump and his administration are committed to ensuring hardworking Americans have access to affordable health care. Mr. President, your executive order signed today is an important step in achieving that goal. I want to thank you and your administration for continuing to focus on finding affordable health care solutions. In addition to instructions given to the Treasury and Health and Human Services departments, the President will task the Department of Labor with considering ways to deliver quality, affordable health care to the American workforce. I'd now like to call upon Senator Rand Paul to say a few brief words. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Acosta. Today's a big day. President Trump is doing what I believe is the biggest free market reform of health care in a generation. This reform, if it works and goes as planned, will allow millions of people to get insurance across state lines at an inexpensive price. 28 million people were left behind by Obamacare, do not have insurance today. This specifically targets and will help people who don't have insurance or people for whom insurance is too expensive. I'm very glad to be part of this, and I really want to commend the President for having the boldness and the leadership and the foresight to get this done. And I'd like to introduce the Vice President of the United States.
Well, good morning. Secretary Acosta, Senator Paul, Secretary Mnuchin, Director Mulvaney, Administrator McMahon. Senator Paul, thank you for those thoughtful remarks, and to Congressman Greg Walden and Congresswoman Virginia Foxx, other distinguished members of Congress, and job creators. It's an honor to share this moment with you today, a moment where President Trump will take a critical step to lower the cost of health insurance for working Americans. Since day one of our administration, President Trump has made it a top priority to rescue the American people from the disastrous failure of Obamacare. Every day Obamacare survives is another day the American people struggle. And all the job creators gathered here today at the White House have witnessed the failures of Obamacare firsthand. Premiums have more than doubled since Obamacare went into effect. And next year, premiums are set to increase even more. While costs have been skyrocketing, choices are plummeting. Next year, nearly half of America's counties will have only one choice of health insurance provider, which means they essentially have no choice at all. As the President and I have traveled the country, we've heard stories from small business owners like those gathered here today, from working families who are struggling under the weight of Obamacare. Today, President Trump will take decisive action to provide the American people with flexibility and freedom from the burdens of Obamacare and expand the number of affordable health care options for working Americans. And Mr. President, I can say I speak for everyone here and for millions of Americans when I say how grateful we are for your determination to repeal and replace Obamacare and your commitment, demonstrated today by this action, to provide the American people with more choices for more affordable health care in the 21st century. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, it's my privilege to introduce the President of the United States of America.
Thank you very much to Vice President Pence for that wonderful introduction and for the great job you do. And I want to thank Secretary Acosta, Secretary Mnuchin, Acting Secretary Hargan, and Administrator McMahon for joining us today. We're all gathered together for something I believe that's going to be very, very powerful for our nation and very good for a lot of people. But before I begin, I have an important update. Yesterday, the United States government, working with the government of Pakistan, secured the release of Caitlin Coleman, Joshua Boyle, and their 3 children from captivity from the Haqqani Network, a terrorist organization with ties to the Taliban. The Pakistani government's cooperation is a sign that it is honoring America's wish that it do more to provide security in the region. And I want to thank the Pakistani government. I want to thank Pakistan. They worked very hard on this, and I believe they're starting to respect the United States again. It's very important. I think right now, a lot of countries are starting to respect the United States of America once again. We hope to see this type of cooperation and teamwork in helping secure the release of remaining hostages and in our future joint counterterrorism operations. So with that, I want to begin by saying it's my pleasure to welcome so many great small business and association leaders to the White House as we prepare to make this truly historic announcement. And that's exactly what it is. We've been hearing about the disaster of Obamacare for so long. In my case, many years, most of it outside in civilian life, and for a long period of time since I started running and since I became President of the United States, I just keep hearing repeal, replace, repeal, replace. Well, we're starting that process, and we're starting it in a very positive manner. And I can say when you get Rand Paul on your side, it has to be positive. That I can tell you. Boy. Rand. I was just saying, as he's getting up and saying all these wonderful things about what we're going to be announcing, I said, boy, that's pretty unusual. I'm very impressed. But 7 years ago, congressional Democrats broke the American healthcare system by forcing the Obamacare nightmare onto the American people. It has been a nightmare. You look at what's happening with the premiums and the increases of 100% and 120%, and even in one case, Alaska, over 200%. And now every congressional Democrat has blocked the effort to save Americans from Obamacare, along with a very small, frankly, handful of Republicans. 3. And we're going to take care of that also because I believe we have the votes to do block grants at a little bit later time, and we'll be able to do that. Premiums have gone skyrocketing. But today, 1/3 of all the counties in America have only a single insurer selling coverage on an exchange, and next year it looks like nearly half of all counties in our country. Think of that. All of the counties, 1/2, will have only one insurer, and many will have none. Many will have absolutely created roadblocks for people to have any form of the insurance we're talking about. This is why in a few moments I will sign an executive order taking the first steps to providing millions of Americans with Obamacare relief. It directs the Department of Health and Human Services, the Treasury, and the Department of Labor to take action to increase competition, increase choice, and increase access to lower-priced, high-quality health care options. And they will have so many options. This will cost the United States government virtually nothing, and people will have great, great health care. And when I say people, I mean by the millions and millions. First, we aim to allow more small businesses to form associations to buy affordable and competitive health insurance. This would open up additional options for employers to purchase the health plans their workers want. I'm also directing Secretary Acosta to consider ways to expand these associations and these health care plans all across state lines. This will create tremendous competition and transformative, in so many ways, change aimed at creating more and lower prices for millions of Americans. But the competition will be staggering. Insurance companies will be fighting to get every single person signed up. And you will be hopefully negotiating, and you'll get such low prices for such great care. It should have been done a long time ago, and it could have been done a long time ago. This will allow thousands of small business employers to have the same purchasing power as large employers to get more affordable and generous insurance options for their workers. Rich and Leslie Baudry, where are they? Where are they? How are you? Nice to see you. How are you? Come on, get up here. Come on. How are you? Nice to see you, Leslie. They're here today from Louisiana, great state. Just left. They had a little hurricane damage, they got hit like Charles. But we took good care of it, right?
Absolutely.
We took good care of it. They're great people. They're small business owners, and they know personally the benefits of association health plans, one of which used to provide health insurance for their employees. But after Obamacare, they were unable to afford their association plan. So they had a great thing. Their employees were happy, and then it ended like so many more. I mean, this is something I hear. Greg, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Greg has been so incredible on this subject. And people had plans that worked, and then all of a sudden they were just totally cut off, and happened to your company also. Rich and Leslie have said that they would love, once again, to use an association health plan. And there are millions of Americans who want more affordable options just like them. And now, with this executive order, Americans will likely soon have those options. We will be very happy to provide them to you, and you will be very happy, Rich. I think you're going to be extremely pleased. If you're not, you can tell them right now. Okay?
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Leslie. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Great to see you. Thank you very much. In addition, my administration will explore how we can expand something called short-term, limited duration insurance. These health insurance policies are not subject to any very expansive and expensive Obamacare coverage mandates and rules. The cost of the Obamacare has been so outrageous, it is absolutely destroying everything in its wake. They were so attractive that just last year, the previous administration crippled the market in an effort to keep people from fleeing the failing Obamacare plans. In fact, they prevented these plans from lasting more than 3 months. They will take action to fix that and to make these affordable, flexible plans much more widely available. So we're going to have a very widely available plan that's going to cost much less. And from the standpoint of the United States government, we will be very happy, won't we, Virginia?
We will.
So they'll get better, and it will cost us nothing. That's not too bad, right? We need some more answers like that. Finally, today's executive order instructs Secretaries Acosta, Mnuchin, and Hargan to explore how they can allow more businesses to use tax-free health reimbursement arrangements, or HRAs, to compensate their employees for their health care expenses. Currently, only about 1/3 of small business employees receive coverage at work, forcing millions of workers to enroll in the exchanges or remain uninsured and to pay the individual mandate penalty. Not good. Not good. That is one of the most unpopular things I've ever seen in government, I can tell you. This order takes first steps to make it easier for businesses to help their workers afford high quality and more flexible health care through reimbursement accounts. With these actions, we are moving toward lower costs and more options in the health care market and taking crucial steps towards saving the American people from the nightmare of Obamacare. Today is only the beginning. In the coming months, we plan to take new measures to provide our people with even more relief and more freedom. And by the way, on another subject, that will include massive tax cuts. We are going to get massive tax cuts, and I believe even Senator Rand Paul, and I know Virginia, Greg, I think you're with us, but the whole country is looking for these massive tax cuts, and we will get them. And we are going to also pressure Congress very strongly to finish the repeal and the replace of Obamacare once and for all. We will have great health care in our country. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. President.
Most important thing.
I'm only signing it because it costs nothing. So this is promoting healthcare, choice and competition all across the United States. This is going to be something that millions and millions of people will be signing up for, and they're going to be very happy. This will be great healthcare. So congratulations to everybody. Thank you, everybody, very much.
President, what did you mean by your Puerto Rico comments this morning? Mr. President, are you committed to Puerto Rico for the long term?
And by the way, later today, the president is expected to announce his nominee to head the Homeland Security Department. Kirstjen Nielsen will have live coverage of that. Expected about 2:30 Eastern over on C-SPAN 3, also online at cspan.org and on the free C-SPAN radio app. The U.S. House gaveling back in, legislative work getting underway at noon Eastern. A number of bills today, including a $36.5 billion disaster relief bill following the recent hurricanes and the western wildfires. Also a bill expanding federal whistleblower protections and other measures, including possible further action on the defense programs and policy bill. Live House coverage here on C-SPAN at noon. Until then, part of today's Washington Journal.
Joining us at our table is Congressman Bill Johnson, Republican of Ohio, member of the Budget Committee, here to talk about a couple of issues, and we'll start with tax reform. The president was pitching tax reform in Pennsylvania yesterday. What do you like about the proposal that you've heard so far, and where are some provisions that you're not crazy about?
Well, I can't think of anything that I don't like. I mean, there's a lot to like in this tax reform package. I mean, if you think about it for a second, making America competitive on the global economic stage, bringing our corporate tax rate down to 20%, that's lower than the average for the industrialized world. That's going to put American businesses back to work. But more importantly, this tax reform, and I don't like the word tax reform as much as I like tax relief. This is a low-income, middle-class America improving quality of life, job-creating tax reform package. It is really going to be good for the American people.
Congressman, what do you make of the headline in the Los Angeles Times that the Trump promises big tax cuts, but GOP-led Congress is already thinking about scaling back? According to the Los Angeles Times, there's conversations happening on Capitol Hill to make the corporate tax rate more like 22-23%. The president wanted 15%. He compromised at 20%. Mm-hmm. Do you think it's a mistake to go to possibly go to 22-23%?
Well, I want to keep it. I'm with the president on this. I started out at 15. I would have loved to have seen us get to 15. That puts us in the driver's seat where we rightfully should be. We're the largest economy on the planet. We're the bulk of the global economy. I would love to see us go to 15. I don't see the president budging very easily off of that 20% mark.
Why do you think some of your colleagues do not want to go as low as 20, that they're trying to argue for 22-23%? I'm
not really sure what their argument would be because we've got trillions of dollars right now overseas that are sitting there because corporations will not bring that money back here to America because they're not going to pay the federal government 35 cents on a dollar to bring it back. So I think it's very, very important that we get the corporate rate as low as we possibly can. Remember, Budget Director Mick Mulvaney and the President and members of the House, we want to see our growth rate, our economic growth rate, get into that 3 to 5% of GDP rather than the anemic 1.6 to 1.9 that we've been hovering at now for the last 8 to 10 years. We've got to get America's economic flywheel back in motion. And I believe this corporate tax rate, getting it as low as we possibly can, is part of the formula to do that.
Well, then what do you say to your Republican colleagues who, according to the Los Angeles Times, are resisting 20% because they want to preserve deductions and loopholes that were targeted for elimination under the White House plan in order to pay for reducing the rate from 35 to 20%?
I'd say to them that they better go back and listen to Ronald Reagan and what he said in 1986 when he got his tax reform package done. And I don't know if you remember that speech or not, but he said, look, in all of this effort, and I'm paraphrasing, in all that we've done here, lawmakers, policymakers, we forgot about one of the most critical factors in the formula, and that's the American people. So I'd challenge my colleagues, go talk to the American people who are depending on the jobs that are going to be created. Remember who pays these corporate taxes. We oftentimes think of this as big business, right? But who pays these corporate taxes? It's the consumers that buy the products that these corporations make. That's who's actually paying the taxes.
Let's hear what our viewers have to say. We'll go to Joe up first in Colorado, a Republican. Hi, Joe.
Hello. First of all, we really need this tax reform. It's going to do an awful lot for regular Americans. Everybody keeps ranting on the media about how it's going to benefit Trump and everybody else. But right now, what we need real tax relief. We don't have it. We need it. We need it terribly.
And Joe, so far from what you've heard, what do you think will benefit you and other middle-class Americans?
Well, first of all, the bottom line tax deduction. It doesn't affect. If I take and I try to write off the interest on my home loan, I can't write it off. Okay, so that standardized deduction is going to help that, because otherwise I've got to go through this big itemization process. The whole package helps regular Americans like me. I'm a rancher, and I don't want to sit there and work my whole life and pay my taxes and then turn around, and when I go to leave my ranch to, say, my child, I don't want them to have to turn around and have to pay for half of that, all the work I've done my whole life again, trying to keep it.
So the estate tax appeals to you as well, repealing the estate tax?
Absolutely.
Okay. Congressman Johnson?
Well, Joe, first of all, I assume that you pay your taxes on your ranch as a pass-through entity, like an Subchapter S or an LLC, maybe a sole proprietorship. So, one of the benefits of this tax relief package that we've put forward is doing exactly what you said, bringing that effective tax rate of 40% down to 25%. We've lowered, in our proposal, we've lowered the tax rate for both corporations and individual small businesses by 15%. That's big on the global scale. And it's going to empower you to put money back into your ranch, to invest in your operations. And importantly, like you said, you're going to protect what you've worked for your entire life, because we're going to repeal the death tax, the estate tax in this plan. So you've said everything that I agree with, my friend.
Al in St. Robert, Missouri, a Democrat. Hi, Al.
Good morning. He needed to stop, tell what he's saying is wrong. They need to pay Social Security and Medicaid and back folks before they do anything. If they put all that money back into that Social Security and Medicaid, they work with the people that what Reagan did in '86. Reagan took the Social Security and Medicaid away from us, put it in to a K-09. Now, if you retire, like I did, I had to pay all that back to Social Security, because what Reagan done in '86. So you're not thinking. We know what you're doing. You're going to take the money from Medicaid and Social Security and pay for your taxes. You'll tell me the truth is not in there, because I read it. Thank you.
Well, that's not true. That's not true, Alan. I can tell you that I've got an 85-year-old mother. The first telephone call that I got when I was elected in 2010 was not to say, congratulations, Bill. It was to say, okay, son, what are you going to do now to make sure that Washington does not mess with my Social Security and Medicare? Because if they do, I'm coming to live with you. Of course, my second phone call was from my wife, who said, you better do what your mother said. So I'm with you, Alan. I believe those are investments that the American people have made into their retirements. You can't roll back the clock and make different retirement plans at this point in your life. I believe the federal government absolutely has a responsibility to honor the pledge and the promise for your Social Security and Medicare, just like my mother and millions of other seniors that are within that retirement window. And we're not taking money out of Social Security and Medicare to pay for this tax program. That's not part of the plan.
Sydney in Alexandria, Louisiana, independent. Hi, Sydney.
Good morning. I would like to ask your guest how they keep saying Ronald Reagan cut taxes and raised revenue. His revenue raises was because his following tax cut was, as far as his first tax cut was $33 billion on the income tax. The following year, he raised taxes $90 billion. And on this death tax, you don't pay death tax until after $5 million. So how does this affect the average American? Thank you.
Number one, I don't care how big your family operation is. You've got a lot of family businesses in America that exceed that cap that you're talking about. I don't think anybody in America, no matter who you are, should work your entire life to build a family business, and then you have to pay that off to the federal government when you pass it on to your children. I don't think that's right. Look, I can tell you this. What we know is that when you let the American people keep more of what they earn and pay less in taxes, where the federal government takes less from the American people, throughout American history, we have seen the effects of that, how it gets the economy going, how people gain confidence and they invest and they save and they put money back into their businesses. It creates opportunities for them and their families and their children. I represent a part of the country, Appalachia, where the average income in my district is somewhere between $30,000 and $35,000 a year. This tax cut is going to be huge for the people in my district. And I'm a retired military guy. And so I can relate to how important these tax cuts are.
What about the impact of tax cuts on the debt? These are CBO numbers. Tax cuts don't reduce the debt. Publicly held federal debt rose as a share of GDP after Reagan tax cuts in 1981, that's number one, the orange line, and Bush cut them in 2001. Here is the debt as it rises along with tax cuts.
I think what is missed in that calculation is the effects of economic growth in the formula. That's the same CBO that estimated that 25 million young people were going to buy into Obamacare. They didn't. Only about 10 million did. They missed the estimate by half. So I think when you're using static scoring versus dynamic scoring, if you just look at the tax side, the expense
All of today's Washington Journal available at cspan.org. Look under Series on the homepage. We'll leave this now and take you live next to the floor of the U.S.